as requirements go, there's a family code section on point, but in general terms, if the parties are eventually going to get divorced, what a judge is going to look for as far as finding a valid prenup is if the parties were on relatively equal footing in negotiating that prenuptial agreement. Because taking it back, what a prenuptial agreement is basically an agreement by two people who are going to be married to deviate from the property laws and the spousal support laws, if they want to, of the state of California and how they treat property and support upon divorce. It's basically just rewriting the laws based on their own contract. There are certain limitations that you can't contract to, such as changing child support laws or dictating custody if you have future children or if they're existing children. So it's limited to property and support. So bringing it back to that, there are disclosures that they would have to exchange prior to entering into that prenup and in sufficient time before negotiating and entering it. So they have a knowledge of what exists, what each party's income is, what each party's assets are, their tax returns for the last few years, things of that nature. So a judge, when it looks retroactively back at it, they know that each party had a sufficient understanding to enter into this contract. Now, as far as the contract terms with enforceability, I touched on this a little earlier, but basically just ensuring that none of the provisions would violate public policy. And, California is a no-fault state. So, for example, if a person wanted to write in, if there's any infidelity of the marriage, I will get X amount in child support or spousal support upon our divorce. The court isn't going to enforce any provision of that because you cannot contract to against child support in an agreement. It's a no-fault state, so the court doesn't care if there's any fidelity involved, including if you contract to that in a prenup. It's just going to be thrown out. With respect to spousal support specifically, the court looks at that a little bit more sternly in a prenuptial agreement versus property. So that gets what's called a second look provision, where the court's not only going to look at the circumstances at the time the individuals contracted the prenup, but also what are the circumstances at the time of divorce. So even if you did everything right, buttoned it up, gave all the disclosures, contracted to fair terms at the time, if circumstances drastically change during the marriage, the court may still not enforce specifically the spousal support provisions. They may still enforce the property provisions if whatever changed so drastically to make the agreement unfair when looked at the prism of what's going on at the time of divorce.